Hi, thank you for coming. I'm Sheldon Silverman. I'm the CEO of Smart Bomb Media Group. We are a mobile media and DOOH company out of North America. Our kind of keystone platform is the iCash TV network, which is the largest check cashing industry, digital out-of-home in-store network in North America. To give you a little bit of background, the check cashing industry in the United States is focused on the underbanked and non-banked consumer. It comprises a little over 60 million people in the United States, and they're non-traditional banking institutions. So this is where mainly urban, multi-ethnic consumers go to cash their checks and do financial transactions. So literally it is the bank within their own community. They tend to be very, very high traffic, especially the brands that we work with. They're some of the highest in the industry. The average store location has around 10,000 customers every single month. Average dwell time is about 8 minutes, so we have that consumer for a nice period of time. And most of that is within the queue. So it's not at the teller window. Once they get to the teller window, the transaction is very, very fast. The reason why brands like us a lot is because for this consumer, we are really the last mile before the purchasing decision. Over 80% of the customers that come into our locations are actually cashing a check and walking out with their money that they're going to use for the next 2 weeks. And they tend to shop in a very, very compressed time frame from the time when they're in the actual check cashing location. Some of my background and why I'm talking on this subject in particular is my background is in the ad agency side of the business. 26 years ago, I started an ad agency that I'm still the chairman of. 4 years ago, we decided to get into the digital signage side of the industry, on the media side, specifically because we saw money going away from the traditional broadcast side of our business, and we were looking at what is the next consumer touch point that could be an integrator with their mobile applications. And so digital out-of-home was a very, very natural extension of that. Because I come from this advertising agency background, we really have focused on the idea of using demographic analytics and doing a very, very deep dive into who our consumer is, both demographically and psychographically. One of the things I've seen over the years in the industry is this real focus on eyeball counts and studies based on traffic. To us, that's kind of a ground level piece. What we think is the more important segment of study and analytics and demographic information for the advertiser and the brand is really the focus on who the consumer is within the retail environment and how you then reach that consumer appropriately. So we've invested a lot within our studies on who these consumers are. We obviously have an advantage because we're in financial institutions. We have very, very strong and robust POS system data that we're able to bump outside data up against. So when you look at, some of the key attributes of your consumer base within the digital signage media side, demographic data is truly the key. It's who that consumer is. A lot of the digital signage companies have placed their bets within industry verticals. We don't look at industry vertical in particular. We look at customer segmentation vertical. And so our customer segmentation vertical is urban, multi-ethnic consumers. Check cashing was the natural first step, but we're moving into C-store and grocery store as well in order to capture them. But this is a sampling of some of the data that we append against our POS system. We have over 30 different demographic and psychographic appends that we do. We do this on an annual basis, and it's based on a cross-section of our entire customer base. We do it on a national level, and we also do it on a DMA base level as well for the advertisers. So when we're working with ad agencies and media buyers and brands, we're really able to give them a truly in-depth picture of who the consumer is. This gives you a little snapshot. This is a sample DMA within the network, and it shows the breakdown by ethnicity. It also provides Equivax super niche groups. This is something that ad agency and brands like to use a lot. It provides them with this demographic, psychographic snapshot as well. And so they're not only getting the raw data, but they're getting the super niche groups as well. This is just an example of some of the demographic snapshots in the super niche group, from very Spartan, quiet homebodies, parts and prayers, and those snapshots give reference, a very, very quick reference of who the consumer is. Because of the studies, we were able to really target down to who our major consumer base is. Our major consumer demographic is urban, Hispanic, and African American. So what we wanted to do was really study on who this consumer was so that we can work with the ad agencies, the media groups on campaigns, both the creative and the multimodal tools that we use in order to interact with those consumers. So if you look at this, newborns will be the majority multicultural before 2020. Hispanic buying power will increase by 45% by 2015. And before engaging in advertising and marketing campaigns, it's really imperative that all of us understand who the audience is. And we have to tailor that message and creative to adhere to the cultural norms and attributes of the audience. We're going to show some examples of that later on. And utilize the marketing channel, the modality of the audience, so that they can engage with the DOOH digital out of home and use mobile and social media connectors in their interaction with those brands. So when you do all of this and you have that data of who your consumer is, and then understand the multimodal touch points that those consumers use, it's really not an impossible mission to go out and build salient and cogent messaging that really gets that consumer base to act. So with the proper demographic and psychographic targeting and the right modality, you can really build a three-dimensional relationship with the consumer base. One of the things that we really looked at was what are those consumers using to engage both with their peers but also with the brands. And this was actually a very interesting study because when we first did it quite a few years ago for the check cashing industry in the United States, the check cashers, the people that owned the check cashing companies, and some of them are very large brands with thousands of check cashing locations across the United States, had no idea that urban, Hispanic, and African American consumers were the highest indexing users of smartphones and social networking connectivity in the United States. They thought that it was counterintuitive that this consumer base wasn't advanced enough to actually use it. So this is the latest study data that we had pulled, and it shows Hispanic internet usage is going to grow to 73% of the Hispanic population by 2015. And mobile is an absolute must with this consumer base. 93% of US Hispanics use a mobile phone regularly. 64% use text messages, and that's against 56% of the general market. I'm going to show you some other areas where they highly out-index as well. And their use of social networks on the mobile device is 12%, and that's versus 10% of the general market. The U.S. Hispanic smartphone usage over time has been growing very, very consistently, and it continues to grow. The type of interactions that they do with their mobile device are text messaging, taking pictures, viewing news, viewing video, and viewing sports. And on all of those, they out-index every other segment of the population in the United States. If you look at Hispanics and African Americans in particular, those are our main core demographic. They over-index on all social networking activities as well. So with Hispanics, they're at 62%, and Black Hispanics, Black African Americans, 55%, and that's against white, which is 38%, and Asian Pacific Islanders, which is 50%. But when you look at the total on the left-hand side, you can see just how much they out-index the general population. So the number of Hispanics on Facebook has also grown 2.8 times just in 2010 and reaching almost 14 million users by March 11th. But we think that the more important aspect is how they interact with social networking like Facebook. U.S. Hispanics spend a daily average of 29 minutes on social networking versus non-Hispanic whites who spend 19 minutes. So this is a marked difference in usage and time on these social networks. And then if you look at their buying power and what they're engaging with these brands as far as shopping dollars, they out-index on dollars per transaction and dollars per buyers dramatically. And bilingual or Spanish primary really are a strong consumer base within this mobile engagement. So some of the things that we found were, stereotypes about the audience mask the complexity and diversity. Research and experimentation will turn up insights that marketers can use to their advantage. When we've presented this to agencies, some of the agencies didn't even have all of these data points in order to be able to make an informed decision. Hispanics place a very high value on being trendsetters and influencers. Their imprint now extends far beyond local communities to the mainstream as well, because of the entertainment industry, because of literature and movies. Hispanics surpass the general population in their use of technology. Social media, smartphones, tablets are all daily tools for Hispanics to socialize, shop, and find entertainment. So using these as connectors to the digital out-of-home experience is very, very important. So some of the things that we look at, for years we've been doing SMS text messaging as well as QR code campaigns. But what we're entering into now in North America is the growth of NFC. There are still not a huge bed of NFC users within the United States, but by the end of this year, almost every single handset that's made in the United States will be NFC enabled, and companies like Walgreens and Office Max have converted their entire POS systems in order to utilize NFC. So we think that the consumer adoption is really going to be there. And we feel that the Hispanic and African American urban consumer is going to lead that charge as well. So because of that, we're launching the largest rollout of NFC and QR enabled smartphone touchpoints in the check cashing industry with our partner Blue Byte. We're going to have well over 1,200 teller windows that are enabled with this. It's a decal that has the NFC chip inside of it, but we're also having the QR code on the Creative as well, so that people that don't have NFC can still take advantage of these offers and content and coupons that ride along with it. And the M tags are addressable down to the location. So just like our digital signage, we can address content very, very specifically to that demographic segmentation at the store level itself. As part of the MTAG network, we're going to be the largest within the check cashing industry, but we're one of only a segment for MTAG network venues in the United States, which includes cafes, bars, clubs, street furniture, health clubs, all the way to airports as well. And I've got some case studies actually on both MTAG usage as well as the QR usage embedded with it. Warhorse did a campaign that was mainly inside of malls, but also in some windows in New York for some very, very high traffic New York streets. They had 228,000 plus downloads in a 4-week time period within these 67 malls and windows. Cowboys and Aliens, another movie, 19,175 downloads and a 35.2% opt-in on it as well. The earliest adopters of the NFC technology has been within the entertainment industry within North America. Tripcase Travel, which was very, very targeted within malls and airports as well, had a 36.5% opt-in rate. And then Rizzoli and Isles, which is a TNT show, actually had special content and a game based on the show itself. And in a very, very short period of time, because this was a test, had 46 NFC taps, but the main mode of transportation of the content was through the QR code, and they had 427 gameplays and follow-up of content from that. So when targeting the ethnic consumer, it's imperative to develop and deliver a brand experience that resonates with their ethnic identity. So iCash TV, our digital network, with the focus on this urban ethnic consumer, we really utilize all of that front-end data that I showed you earlier, those 30 plus different attributes that we have, as well as knowledge of the multimodal communication that our consumer bases really embrace. And what we do is we take that and try and create great creative with our agencies, with the brands, in order to speak to those specific consumers. What we did is we compiled some problems in the past when agencies or brands or digital out-of-home networks took an English branded, North American English branded campaign and literally did a translation into Spanish without really understanding any of the ethnic cues. We think what they did is they just looked in a dictionary and changed the words. But if you look at it, Turn It Loose for Coors Light, when they translated it into Spanish, it read suffer from diarrhea. Frank Perdue's chicken slogan, it takes a strong man to make a tender chicken. When it translated, it actually said it takes an aroused man to make a chicken affectionate. The Got Milk campaign, which is one of the most famous campaigns in all of North America, when they translated it into Spanish, both for the English market as well as for the Mexican market, Got Milk was translated into Are You Lactating? And then Coca-Cola, this one was really interesting because of they're a huge brand within China, but China has so many different dialects that it's very, very difficult to translate American campaigns or English campaigns into the Chinese dialect. So when they first did it, they used the word kukukela, which has a meaning of bite the wax or female horse stuffed with wax. And then Coke researched 40,000 different characters to find a phonetic equivalent, and that phonetic equivalent ended up being happiness in the mouth. So that ended up working. But we just wanted to give some examples of what happens when you don't really understand who your target consumer is, and you just try and take your traditional general market advertising and apply it to that. And I think the same thing goes for digital out of home. It's not just who the demographic is, but it's the platform itself. And agencies and brands really have an opportunity to take completely different creative and utilize the advantages that digital out-of-home actually has, both in environment as well as in modality, and create some really, really compelling advertising along those lines. So does advertising need to target and address Hispanics directly, or would general market ads suffice? We absolutely believe general market ads will not suffice. We have the studies from the past 4 years to show that when our advertisers or agencies who buy into the network use the general ads, they do not get the same type of lift or brand experience as when they tailor it specifically to who the consumer is. Nielsen IAG did a lot of analysis on this. They do it every year. They found that when it's purposed specifically for the Spanish market, the Hispanic market, they have a 16% higher brand recall and a 22% better message recall as well. And the reason for that is because you can build these brand advertising and direct response advertising spots that have culturally relevant cues embedded within it and use Hispanic characters, music, iconography, and colors so that you really, really capture their attention. So this is one example of what we did with one of our brands. One of our large advertisers on our network is a Visa debit card in the United States. It's called the ICE Visa card. The problem with the ICE Visa card is the immigration and naturalization part of the government in the United States 4 years ago changed its name to ICE. So going to the Hispanic market with a brand as ICE is very, very troublesome and is not embraced by those consumers. So we worked with their agency. I'm actually the chairman of the agency that does all their work, and we worked with them to look at what our alternatives were. And what we did is we literally built a new brand. So that now ICE has the general market brand, which is used for general market and African American market within the United States, and now they have a completely different Hispanic brand. And with that, we used QR coding, we used Twitter connectors, Facebook connectors, and with SMS messaging. When we first launched this campaign, we had an 8% response rate in our initial tests. It's actually grown since then, but that 8% response rate absolutely blew us away because it far exceeded any of the ICE general market campaigns that we had done before. So the way we started it is we looked at what the brand should be for the Hispanic market, and the foundation of the brand was the word fuego, which means fire, and the use of both typography and color that resonates with the Hispanic marketplace. One of the reasons why we used fuego was because we had the ICE card, and we knew in some situations, especially on the B2B side, but even some consumer applications, we were going to co-market these cards together. So the co-marketing advantages that we had with having the fire and ICE card were apparent right from the beginning. So from the foundation of the Fuego logo, we developed this iconographic footprint for the Hispanic card launch, and we led this with our digital out-of-home media. But we didn't stop with the digital out-of-home media. That was the cornerstone of the ads and the ad campaigns that we did within the check cashing locations. But we wanted to make sure that we had static POP as well embedded within it. So that they're surrounded by this brand experience within the retail location. And then this is an example of how we co-marketed the brand. So we did some spots that really embraced the multicultural aspect and enabled that fire and ice, the fuego and ice, to be connected so that we can actually advertise to this multicultural consumer at the same time within the locations that had that mix. Just to let you know, we do have some stores that are literally 98% Hispanic, so we don't do any English advertising in those stores, but the majority of our stores do have a percentage mix between American-speaking and Hispanic-speaking consumers. This is an
Con
example of a
MoneyGram,
MoneyGram
el
spot.
mundo se hace un poco más pequeño. Las fronteras se vuelven puentes, los océanos, oportunidades. Y todos los días son buenos para acercarse, para enviar o recibir dinero. Nuestras bajas tarifas, transacciones en 10 minutos y miles de locales alrededor del mundo hacen que acercarse sea fácil. Y fácil es bueno. MoneyGram, la opción está en tus manos.
MoneyGram, we actually work with them to have their agency, their brand agency is actually a London-based agency, and then they have an American agency as well. But we work with them to create creative that is down to the demographic level. So not only do we do Hispanic spots, we have English spots, we have spots in Vietnamese for areas where we have a high density of Vietnamese and Chinese, and we're really able to address down to those specific locations. The other thing that we really discussed with MoneyGram was having these DRTV response connectors as well. So in this spot, we've got the 800 MoneyGram number as well as the web site, but in the next one you'll see that we embed some social marketing as well. And this is for African American dominant stores.
Holiday season with MoneyGram brings those who may be a world away a little closer. And the magic of giving is reflected in the joy of receiving. Spread holiday joy far and wide with MoneyGram.
And on this, I can't share response rates, but we also work with Western Union, which is their biggest competitor. The way it works in the United States, the majority of stores are either or. So they're either a Western Union servicing store or a MoneyGram servicing store. But last year, we ran a annual campaign for Western Union, and the first quarter of 2011 growth year over year from 2010, and we did this against controls, was a 17% lift in sales, which was a huge lift in sales using this digital out-of-home media within the in-store segment. And one of the reasons was that traditionally within the check cashing and retail environments, they only had static advertising, and literally these locations would have their walls wallpapered with posters from various sponsored brands within the store. And so the digital out-of-home really was able to cut through the clutter. The next example is an example of how we used a lot of research to actually create an ad that addressed a lot of the different multicultural points for the brand itself. What we did is we worked with NetSpend. NetSpend is the largest prepaid debit card in North America, and we worked with them to do a very wide-ranging customer survey. It was first an online survey, then it was a phone survey, then it was an in-person survey with a statistically valid random sampling of their customer base. And we literally created an ad using their actual customers and their customers' own words.
I love that NetSpend helps me to control my money.
It's convenient. I can use it anywhere.
I pay every bill with the NetSpend card.
Anytime that I'm out at a restaurant,
Grocery store.
The light bill, phone bill.
I think the NetSpend savings account is great.
As soon as I make a purchase, it immediately goes on my phone.
I always go online to check my NetSpend account.
I know exactly how much I'm spending at any given time.
One card and I can do it all.
I can't live without it.
This is my NetSpend card.
This is my NetSpend card.
So, the key takeaways I think here are within the digital out-of-home industry, I think that the networks really have to look at understanding as deeply as possible who their consumer is. They have to have a willingness to share this with the media companies, ad agencies, and brands directly. And I think that the agencies and brands really have to embrace the idea of creating very specific campaigns for the digital out-of-home industry rather than just repurposing their general ads that they're using on network TV. We are starting to actually see that. We actually just formed a partnership with NEC and with the VukuNet portion of NEC. And we're working very, very closely with both them and Starcom Media Group. And the reason why they were so interested in kind of moving forward with a test platform that embedded some key software within the digital signage so that Starcom Media Group can not only have visibility to our locations and be able to do purchasing directly off of the demographic and psychographic segmentation that we have, but also to have play reports that are fed directly into Starcom Media's accounting system. And I think that the main reason why they were so interested in doing that is because we were able to go to the table at the beginning with very, very robust demographic and psychographic information on who the customer base was. The really important thing for this industry to understand is we don't want to get forced by the agencies into a model that's more of a internet marketing model where it's pay per click. It's actually not fair to us as an industry because the static side of the industry, billboards, posters, get very, very robust pricing. And the digital side actually should have more robust pricing than that because we can show through Nielsen, Arbitron, and case studies that we do get much higher response rates within this industry. Thank you. Any questions?